Hey Scrubs, I hope you're ready for some magic, because it's part 6 of the starter deck series, and that means we're starting with the Spellcaster's Judgment structure deck. And there is a lot of spell counter stuff going on. There are 2 skilled Dark Magicians that are very strong and can also accumulate spell counters to summon a Dark Magician from anywhere including the graveyard, so its effect is pretty much always in play. We also get some Apprentice Magicians, which can special summon another copy of itself, or Magician of Faith in face-down defense position if destroyed by battle. It even has a secondary ability to add spell counters whenever it's summoned, which can create a lot of value for this deck. There are also some other spell counter based monsters like Blast Magician that can blow up monsters based on their attack points, and Mythical Beast Cerebus, whose attack can be built up until it makes an attack and then returns to normal. There's also a Royal Magical Library that can put in defense and maybe get you some cards. And after that, we get a copy of Chaos Sorcerer, which is just top drawer, and also top drawer 1 Tsukuyomi, which should need no introduction. We also get some nice spell staples here, but you'll notice there is no Pot of Greed in this deck, so we're going to want to pick up one of those eventually. You get a copy of Mage Power, which is a great equip spell, and Magical Dimension can be really good if you have an excess of strong Spellcaster monsters in your hand. Looking at our trunk, we don't have any Spellcasters besides a 3rd Magician of Faith, which we don't really need since we already have 2, but another 1900 attack monster never really hurts in the early game, and since this deck needs a healthy supply of spell cards, we're going to use the most we can from here, including Black Pendant, which makes its first YouTube appearance here. Congratulations, Black Pendant. And of course some of the good traps, minus the Magic Cylinder because one already comes in the Spellcaster deck. So finding the right pack to buy on day 1 for this deck is very easy. Magician's Force has so many cards that help this archetype, and we're looking for some key upgrades, such as a 3rd Apprentice Magician, a 3rd Skilled Dark Magician, a Magical Marionette, which is an incredible spell counter boss monster by the way, and also an Old Vindictive Magician, which is basically a man-eater bug that can be searched with an Apprentice Magician. You're going to want at least 3 of these cards before moving on, and we only need 1 of each, so while it seems like a lot, they are just commons and rares, and after testing this for a bit myself, you can easily find all 4 in a reasonable amount of time. Plus there's also a chance to get Tribe Infecting Virus, which can replace any of these cards as well. And so this is our day 1 deck edit, where we're actually going to keep most of the monsters except for the princesses, the Dark Eradicator Warlock, and Chaos Command Magician, but if you don't end up pulling a Marionette, feel free to keep the Command Magician since he's really not that bad. And everything after that are just spells and traps, where I drop the more casual tier cards for more meta options. This deck ends up being a very controlling deck that aims to slowly gain card advantage over the opponent, and once you turn the corner and get your opponent only down to a few cards, it's very hard for them to come back. And a lot of the deck's resilience comes from the Apprentice Magicians. In between Old Vindictive Magician and Magician of Faith, you will probably be able to deal with most situations, especially if you have a decent amount of spells to choose from in the graveyard. Plus, if you can get Tsukuyomi to get multiple flips out of your Magicians of Faith and Old Vindictive Magicians, you're going to be pulling ahead way fast. Or you can even flip your Apprentice Magicians to get more spell counters, which kind of feels neat as well. Also, while this deck has some very weak monsters in its lineup, it also has the most 1900 attack 4-star monsters available on the first day. And that's even if you don't count Breaker the Magical Warrior. So needless to say, this deck has a little bit of backbone as well. When it comes to upgrading this deck, there's one card that really stands out for the Spellcaster archetype, and that is Magician's Circle. This allows you to special summon a Spellcaster monster with 2000 or less attack from your deck whenever anyone declares attack with a Spellcaster. This can allow you to search things like Magical Marionette to get a little bit more board control. You can find a Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer for some graveyard control, or if you need an answer to a large monster or need to deal a bunch of damage, you can use Injection Fairy Lily. And after you got that little basic strategy put together, you just want to get the format staples to upgrade the rest of the spells and traps. And so this is the spell counter list I ended up with. There are some really cool things like the Crush card and the Toon Table of Contents package, but other than that, it's a relatively cookie cutter design. However, there are a ton of fun spell counter cards that you can use, like Anti-Spell, Miracle Restoring, and Legendary Flame Lord, but competitively speaking, I'd say this is around the peak of what the spell counter archetype can do. Another great option you could easily transition into is a pure Dark Magician deck that can utilize things like Dark Magic Attack and Thousand Knives, and you can also run things like Dark Magician Girl and Sage's Stone, which is pretty fun, or you can use any of the Dark Magician based monsters such as Dark Magician Knight, Dark Eradicator Warlock, or Dark Sage. But once you're really DP rich, there are some other Spellcaster decks that will require a little bit more of a drastic overhaul, such as a Silent Magician type of deck, or even a Gravekeeper's deck that you can get into by constantly buying Pharaonic Guardian. And that's what your prospects look like as a tryhard with the Spellcaster deck. I'll be back again to rank all the starting decks, as well as give some final thoughts on each of them. So be sure to tune in so that one day you can become a net decking tier whore. Until then, stay magical, scrubs.